Prof. Henning, thanks very much for joining us here on SABC News this afternoon.
Good afternoon, SABC News.
Well, it's very important, I think, while it is the news that is out indeed today, AfriForum being victorious in their bid to have the matric results published on newspaper, as has been the tradition. What are your views? I mean, I'm sure you've seen that in the news today and have formed some sort of an opinion on the matter. Are you of the view that indeed matric results should be published on newspapers and, for everyone to see?
Yes, my view is pretty much the same as the one expressed by Elijah Mshlangu from the DBE. There is this law, it's new, it's complex, and here's this exam, and we are used to having these results, especially us who do research, and especially the institutions that do large-scale research and want to work from that. And I saw the clip of the counsel who argued for AfriForum, and I find nothing wrong with his opinion. And I think the judge made a good decision, because at this point, what we need to celebrate is that teachers and the matriculants persevered, that they did the exam, that fewer gave up. And, so yeah, I think it should be made public because we need information. And I don't think it's so personal to have your matric results published, because who will abuse you? Social media. Yes, they will abuse you in any case.
Yeah. We had some opinions from matrics. We went, SABC News did indeed get some reaction from some of the matrics when the Education Department initially made the announcement that, those matric results won't indeed be publicized. And, a lot of them were saying, this is great, especially for those students who might not do well, for those who fail. We've certainly been hearing over the years about students who even went as far as committing suicide, and then one wonders then, is it really to the benefit of the students? I mean, of course the publications make money of it because everybody's buying the newspaper that particular day, and I actually think that was one of the arguments that was in fact put forward. And it's important to discuss whether or not, at the end of the day, when you're weighing it up, does it indeed benefit the students? You talk about research. I'm sure there are other ways and means to be able to conduct or do your research into how matriculants are doing.
Good point. However, the people who would abuse you would be people that you know, or people in your social media group, or people at your school, as we know from all the horror stories we've heard through the years about matriculant suicide. I don't think the general public would precisely and specifically persecute an individual student and make her worried. And I think maybe where we haven't taken the right path is by teachers preparing the matriculants for the fact that, the whole country will know if they know your name and your student number and so forth. So I think we should prepare the young people better to deal with the public assessment, in a way, of how hard they've worked, how hard their teachers have worked, and specifically in these hard years, how resilient they have been. The mere fact that they wrote this exam, it's kudos to them and to their teachers and their families.
Yeah. Let's talk about then the matric results set to be released tomorrow. We obviously have to then, and when we see the results tomorrow, have to then sort of assess the performance over the years with matric and how we're seeing it going year on year. But it's also very important to discuss this issue, and I see One Movement SA leader Musi Maimane being quite vocal on this particular issue, which has been, something that we discussed, has been the 30% pass mark. And I wonder where you stand on that particular issue. Do you think that the standard is very low? And also just looking at how we are doing and how our matriculants are doing year on year. What are your thoughts as you kind of look at this as an education expert?
I may be an education expert, but let me just qualify that.
Yeah.
I don't do large-scale research, and I leave that to the Stellenbosch people and to Nick Spall, who is an ex-postdoc of mine. But what I can say to you, and about this, I can really vouch, is that if kids are in a primary school, especially the foundation phase, maybe up to the 5th, 6th grade, and they have learned how to read their texts properly, how to work with mathematics and with science and so on, I think they can more or less help themselves if they have materials. So I don't think, for instance, that we must put so much blame on teachers. So 30%, 40%, 50%, 60%, wherever you put the standard, some kids will make it and some won't. So I'm not particularly in favor of setting the standards for a certain type of matric, which is not a baccalaureate pass, at 30%. But on the other hand, I do know, and I say this with some trepidation, I have to admit, that not all assessment instruments do their job as they should, because we are humans, those of us who make them. Even though Umalusi, validates everything, and even though we try our best to be scientifically proper with setting these assessments, there are always gaps and loops. I just have to summarize. I do believe, like we've been saying for the last 10 years at our research at UJ Soweto, and that is matric begins in grade 1.
Yeah. Just in closing, as we wrap up our conversation, Prof, let's talk inequalities that are still very evident in very many of our schools and provinces, and the impact that those are having on performance and the outcome of the overall matric results. And I just want to, I want to add to this. You often will see at some of these impoverished schools children that do so remarkably well. And to me, that pass, that A from that child of an impoverished school who's taking maybe 3 taxis or walking to school every morning, compared to a pass of a better off school, I find to be a little bit more valuable. And I wonder if you share that sentiment with me. I mean, it really is it's quite special to see what some of these children are able to do. I mean, I read a couple of years ago about a young boy who would study up until night at school, ask the securities to close. He would get on a train, go home, and repeat the same thing all week. And I just thought that was something special. And I wonder if enough credit is given to some of those schools and those students who really do perform quite well.
I cannot agree with you more. Unequivocally, yes. And I think in addition to celebrating them and giving thanks for what they've achieved in these really tough circumstances, and let me tell you, we do quite a little bit of work in the northern provinces, in rural areas. There's no question about it that resilience comes from 2 places. It comes first and foremost from the people we call family and community, and then the school. And, let's not dwell into the good old apartheid past and my own youth. I grew up really poor and moved schools all the time, but my mom and my dad were there, and we had food. And I look back and I think just that stability made the difference. Not my wonderful teachers, because they were pretty awful, some of them. So I want to say that it's in the home with the mom and the dad and the grandparents and the aunties and the neighbors that you learn to be resilient, and that you pick up the value of studying and of doing your homework and of traipsing to school. My goodness, some of these kids who even cross the rivers and to go to schools where there are really very few facilities. And I mean, I don't want to talk about the latrines even. But nevertheless, there's something that drives them, which is the human spirit. And specifically, I have to say, young people in our country in the last few years have learned to look inward to themselves. And I've seen so many kids in primary schools specifically, where I work mostly, but also some in high schools, who just say, I'm going to do this. And I'm going to just put shoulder to the wheel. And I'm doing it for my mom and my dad and my grandmother and so forth, but also for myself. I want to get somewhere. I want to also help. And I think that sense, which in the African cultures is referred to as Ubuntu, I can't claim it for myself, but I respect it so much, is because if I survive, if I cope, if I pass this matric with a reasonable result, then it means that I am helping my own community, my own family, my siblings, and so forth.
Yeah. Prof, a pleasure talking to you. Let's leave it on that positive note. We appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
All right, that is Professor Elizabeth Henning, South Africa's National Research Foundation at the University of Johannesburg. She is an education expert.